I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to do a review of the new Tamron 150 to 600 millimeter f5 to 6.3 VC USD, and this is the G2 version of that lens. Today I'm going to focus mostly on a comparison with the original version of the lens, which didn't have a G series. That's a new thing for Tamron, but for the sake of convenience today, we'll refer to it as the G1, just so we can distinguish between the two. That lens is now, or I should say this lens, is now very much a known commodity, both in its strengths and weaknesses. And so obviously Tamron's goal in releasing the G2 version had a few purposes, but one of the primary purposes, of course, was to improve on the shortcomings of the G1 of the lens. After this lens was released, of course, Sigma released its two-pronged approach with a contemporary version and a sport version. The reality is that there wasn't a big difference optically between the contemporary and the sport versions of the lens. They were both very good. In fact, all of these lenses really were very good, particularly when one considers their price point. However, the sport version, it brought a lot of extra functionality to the table, along with a vastly improved build quality over the contemporary and over the Tamron G1 version. The downside, of course, to the Sigma Sport is it's an exceptionally heavy lens, and it adds on much more weight, and the way that the weight is distributed, because it has a very heavy 105 millimeter front element and a metal lens hood, it meant that when you were shooting with that lens, you had to support a lot of weight far out from your body when you had it zoomed out. And I found it to be the most challenging lens that I've used personally to shoot handheld. That's, of course, a challenge for a lot of people that do like to shoot lenses like this handheld. The sport version, its tripod collar could not be removed, and so that was another issue that was there as a part of that. And so what I want to do today is to examine how that Tamron has managed to kind of come back with a lens that is still far more accessible than the sport lens, but definitely ups the ante when it comes to the overall build quality. Now, to get this out of the way, of course, part of Tamron's purpose in releasing a new version of this lens, and by the way, I suspect that we will see a G2 version of a number of Tamron's popular zoom lenses, the 24 to 70, 70 to 200, maybe even the 15 to 30 millimeter. And in doing so, to kind of standardize the look of their new line, they have a great new design philosophy, and this is the first zoom lens to incorporate that new SP look that they're using. But it also, of course, brings it online to become compatible with the tapping console. I've seen just recently how important having that compatibility is. When the new Canon 5D Mark IV came out, while my lenses that I have that are from the new SP line, they were already ready to go. But if there had been an issue, Tamron could very quickly roll out a firmware update to prevent any kind of issues. I did, with my older Tamron lenses, have some issues, particularly when it came to live view performance. And so I had to send those lenses into Tamron and have them do a firmware update. And so, of course, it's beneficial to Tamron if they can roll out those firmware updates right to end users and help to eliminate that step of having to have the lenses sent in for service. But of course, the tapping console functionality gives you a lot of flexibility. It allows you to customize focus. In this case, it allows you to customize focus from at 150 millimeters and then at 300 and 400 and 500, 600, 450, along the way, all of these additional steps. And you can tweak that focus at 3 different focus distances. And so by the time you get it all dialed in, you'll have a lens that is exceptionally accurate. And one of the main advantages to this new lens is they really have improved the autofocus. For one thing, it has a more sophisticated feel than the focus motor in the G1 version. You can just tell that when you're shooting, it's a smoother focus, and also there's more speed there, particularly on the long end. And so really autofocus is quite snappy now. But on top of that, they've also customized you can customize not just the focus accuracy, you can also tweak the focus limiter behavior, and of course the vibration compensation. So let's jump in and let's take a look specifically at that, because on the G1 of the lens, there was only an on and off for the VC or the vibration compensation. And of course, Sigma, when they brought out their contemporary, and then even more so when they brought out the sport version of the lens, it allowed you to have a lot more flexibility in how you're going to tweak that behavior of the OS for the Sigma versions. So Tamron has rectified that with the G2 version by allowing you, number one, to instead of just having on and off, right on the lens itself, you have the on-off switch, but they've added a mode switch for the VC. And so you have the standard position, which is position 1. The second position is for panning, where one axis of stabilization is turned off so you can follow motion. And then in the third setting, it allows you to use what they call shutter release priority mode, which basically it doesn't stabilize the viewfinder so much as it stabilizes at the moment of contact, or the moment when you actually go to shoot and the shutter is released. So they claim that this third mode actually gives you about a 2/3 stop advantage in the actual stability of that. And so if you're shooting from a monopod, or if you're not so concerned, maybe if you're following quick action and you don't want the viewfinder to be stabilized because it might disrupt what you're doing, that mode 3 might be good for you. But the cool thing is that you can also tweak the behavior of that first mode if you're so inclined. And let's say that you're more of a video shooter. You have the option of having a viewfinder priority stability, which basically means that rather than kicking on and off, that is the VC is going to stay on more routinely and regularly, and so it just helps you to have a stabilization basically all the time. And so it's a big plus if you're shooting a video. And so it's nice to be able to customize that behavior to your liking. When it came to the overall build of the original Tamron version, there's nothing wrong with it. I found that it held up well. I owned one of these for a while before I went to the Canon 100-400L Mark II. But I found that the build was fine, but they certainly have done a huge amount of improvement to the new version. While the original build was fine, there's definitely some really plasticky parts, lens hood for example, and overall the feel is just not nearly as premium. I find that with the G2 version, all of the surfaces have been improved. Everything that you touch just feels so much better. When it comes to the lens hood, while this lens hood still is plastic, it feels more substantial, and furthermore, it's a far more premium plastic, to where it's like a soft touch material, and a lot like the Sigma Art series, there's kind of a rubberized transition here that just feels a lot nicer to the touch. All of the actual surfaces themselves, even the metal, it's a lightweight metal that is used as the main barrel construction in this, and it just feels more premium. It feels less plasticky. And one thing I found with the version 1 is that there wasn't necessarily a consistent behavior always in the actual zoom action. In other words, you get a few points where there was a little more effort required than others, and so not quite sticking points, but points where the resistance wasn't quite as smooth. I definitely find with the G2 version that is really improved, that the whole process is very evenly damped and just feels a whole lot better. Furthermore, we've already discussed in the first version, but I'll go over it quickly here again. Beyond just having the locking mechanism, like for transport, it has this very innovative new kind of clutch lock mechanism, which allows you to lock at any point that you want. You simply can actually move the zoom ring forward, and it becomes an easy lock mechanism. So in field use, it's much more kind of intuitive. When you're ready to shoot, you just quickly engage that, and you're already there. You're not hunting and looking for a button. You don't have to take your eyes off the action, because it's easy to find that by touch to engage or disengage, however the case may be. On top of that, I find that, however, that it's less inclined towards zoom creep anyway than what, as you can see, the V1 version is. And the V1 version, particularly if you're somewhere towards the middle of the range, it will just quickly collapse. Whereas this is, you can just see that there's a difference in the damping. Even when I reach that point of kind of no return, you can see that there's just a lot kind of smoother quality to it. And so the action of that is vastly improved. Likewise, the focus ring is just a little bit better materials to touch. All of the surfaces, everything that you touch, it feels more premium. And so this feels like a higher quality lens. And I think really it kind of strikes a nice balance when compared to the Sigma Sport, and that the Sigma Sport still feels better yet. It feels very metal, you know, almost like military grade construction. But and so I'm sure it's probably even more rugged than what this lens is. But it comes at the cost of that huge weight premium. And while the G2 version has put on a little bit of weight compared to the G1, this lens weighed in at 1,950 grams, whereas the new version comes in at 2,010 grams. And so it's 60 grams difference in weight, and the truth of the matter is that holding these lenses side by side, it's not enough to really detect. And so it's not going to change your shooting really at all. And so I think that you get a lot of upgrade in materials here and functionality at very, very little cost. And when it comes to the weight. And so I think that it really strikes a nice balance. And it has Tamron's SP line, far more robust weather sealing. This had some weather sealing. It had the gasket at the back. But in the SP line, it's not just the rear gasket. There are internal seals at points along the way. On the front element, it has an expensive fluorine coating that makes it far more resistant to fingerprints and smudges and oil, and makes it very easy to clean. And so, you know, those are premium components that have been added to this. And so overall, in general, it just feels like a much higher end lens. So as you can see, Tamron really has addressed a lot of the shortcomings of the first generation lens and has improved just about every aspect of the build quality along with the handling of the G2 lens. It seems to me that Tamron has really paid attention to the feedback of real photographers that have been using that lens and have really worked to address a lot of the issues that photographers had with using the first generation lens. And so I applaud them for that and listening to feedback and actually giving us what we were looking for in terms of the upgrades there. Because of the length of this review, I've actually divided it into two parts, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to cover. And in the second half of this review, I'll be looking at the overall image quality and breaking that down, bokeh quality, and comparing it directly to the first generation lens. And so stay tuned for that. That should come sometime next week. If you haven't already, you can follow me on social media. There's linkage in the description down below. There's also a link to an ongoing image gallery that has a lot of samples that I've taken with that lens. And along with that, there's a link to the cotton carrier harness system that I use to carry it in, as well, of course, as a link if you want to shop and look at the lens itself. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.